Right, we speak to Thembisa Fakude, Senior Research Fellow and Director of Africa-Asia Dialogues. A very good evening to you, sir. Thanks so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. So, of course, confirmation then after much speculation that there will be an expansion of BRICS member states. How should we be reacting? I mean, we've seen some of the reactions from the political parties, mixed reactions as one would expect. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting, of course, the combination of the countries that have been included. But my concern is the three countries from the Gulf, namely United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. These are countries that are known for basic violation of human rights. Saudi Arabia went to Turkey in Istanbul, abducted Jamal Khashoggi, a well-known journalist from Washington Post, chop his head and dissolve his body in acid. So it's now part of BRICS. You know, Iran, not long ago, arrested a young girl who was accused of not adorning hijab or the veil in an appropriate way, banged her head on the police van, and she died. And after that, there were protests, and the protesters were arrested, and some of them were sentenced to death. So these are the countries that are involved or added to BRICS. The United Arab Emirates, we know that it led an unfair war against the Houthis in Yemen and killed scores of human beings, including Egypt, which is full of, the jails of Egypt are full of journalists and civil and political activists. So those are the kind of countries that are involved in this. And I don't think there's anything to write home about, except, of course, that, Egypt and Ethiopia, who has been having some problems with the Grand Renaissance Dam and the flow of water into the Nile, now have a platform through which they can speak and negotiate. So that's a new platform. The other point which I think is important, and I think the country that's supposed to worry henceforth is Israel, because Israel used to share a common enemy with Saudi Arabia, namely Iran. Now we see Iran and Saudi Arabia making that approachment, which means, therefore, that they are likely to get closer to each other.
I want to come back to your points about the countries that are known for, human rights violations. I mean, the same argument can then be raised about China. And, we've in the past had criticism of South Africa being in bed with China, which is also known for some of its human rights violations. But it seems we've worked well with China to the point that, they are, in fact, our biggest trading partner. So I'd like to understand, the point that you're making. Does that not also come to the point of China, which has been a BRICS member state throughout?
Well, yeah, my response was mainly for the 6 additional countries. But you're correct. China continues to oppress people, particularly the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province, where they're kept under camps under the guise of trying to, remove Islamic education and install some new kind of nationalist position. So we know about the Uyghur Muslims suffering in China. We know about the Muslims that are displaced and often killed en masse in India by the nationalist BJP, which is led by Prime Minister Modi. We also know about the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So it has not been good news when it comes to basic human rights. But I think the platform will provide some sort of economic discussion which could lead to some prosperity and development of Africa.
Yeah, and still, I think on the same sort of point, I mean, when talking about these added member states, I mean, it's often easier to reach some sort of consensus when you're dealing, with a smaller group. I mean, even in a family gathering, if you're a smaller group, you're likely to reach consensus easier and quicker. But once the group expands, there's going to be more different opinions, more interjections, more problems, more disagreements. Could that be the case here? I mean, we're more than doubling, this bloc membership of this bloc. It's 11 from 5. Might there be challenges based on that?
Well, I think so, but it also depends, what are they seeking to achieve? I don't see any impediment at the moment from these countries for having bilateral or multilateral relations between themselves. I don't understand why we need BRICS to facilitate business, to facilitate African development. Africa has got individual countries, that is, have bilateral relations with all of these countries. So I'm not quite sure how the BRICS is going to fast track nor facilitate any development, and I'm yet to be convinced. Because if you look at, for example, the Gulf countries that are added, they have got a number of multilaterals and bilaterals with various countries in the world, and it's business as usual. I don't think they needed to be added into the BRICS plus community for them to do well in business. They're already, thriving, doing good business and politicking amongst themselves. So I'm yet to see and understand exactly how BRICS is going to facilitate further development of these countries.
Yeah, the thing that's been most spoken about, I mean, even if you switch on social media, for example, is this issue about, less reliance when it comes to trading on the US dollar. And I'd like you to weigh in on that and your thoughts on that. I mean, we've heard what some of the political parties have had to say. I heard the ATM political parties saying that, it's about time. In fact, they'll take it a step further and say that, in fact, we should withdraw from the Rome Statute. We heard FF Plus saying that, it's an effort to create an alternative, but that it won't be an easy road, and that, it's obviously trying to remove too much reliance from the Western economic bloc. So, of course, as we said, mixed reactions. The DA saying, I think, that they were concerned, but they noted. What are your thoughts, especially on this issue of the less reliance on the US dollar, because that is really something that people have chosen to really zoom on and focus on?
Dollar is going to be around for a very, very long time. But I do support this multi-currency plan that BRICS has. In other words, countries trading using their own currency. But I think the pipe dream is thinking that in the next couple of years, in fact, 20 years or so, dollar will be replaced by some sort of a new currency that will be devised by the BRICS countries. It's not going to happen anytime soon. I don't see it happening in our generation. Yeah. But of course, they're going to push that agenda. So I support the multi-currency that's been proposed. In other words, countries dealing amongst themselves. That's first. But at the same time, it will be foolhardy for us to think that the Americans and Europeans are just sitting and waiting for their countries to be collapsed by this development of BRICS. I mean, we saw, for example, Janet Yellen and Antony Blinken visiting President Xi and on a charm offensive. And later on, we saw Prime Minister Modi going to the Washington and later on to France. And it was charm offensive. So Americans are not really sitting waiting for their countries to collapse or impeded by the development of BRICS.
Indeed, good point. Thank you very much, Thembisa Fakude. We appreciate your time, sir. Senior Research Fellow and Director of the Africa-Asia Dialogues. They're weighing in for us, of course, on the just ended BRICS Summit, which was held here in Johannesburg.